Gamecock fans, now you can have your coffee and also support the Gamecocks in a championship quest to get to the top of the SEC and the top of the country by going to GamecockCoffee.com and purchasing Rise and Shine New Orleans Roast Gourmet Coffee. All of your purchases go to benefit Garnet Trust and put NIL dollars in the coffer of the Gamecocks official NIL collective. Check it out today and support the Gamecocks NIL. Good morning, Gamecock fans. JC Shurburtt here with coffee. Today is Tuesday, April 8th, the year of our Lord 2025. Certainly happy you guys and gals have decided to join me this morning as we talk through Gamecocks and a bit of other topics here in the morning. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Last night, the Florida Gators became the first SEC men's basketball team to win the national championship since 2012 with a 65-63 win over the Houston Cougars. Really good basketball game. I hated the way it ended because it ended on kind of a play where the kid from Houston was about to turn it over, went up and down, kind of out of control there. But Houston played really good defense. Gators, as they've done all season long, really, especially in the postseason, came back after being down 12. Clayton heated up, and they won it. So hats off to Todd Golden and the entire Florida community. Those folks, things hadn't been super duper down there by their standards, but they won another national title. And that, I've got a couple of points as it relates to the Gamecocks off of that. Tonight, the Gamecock baseball team's back in action against USC Upstate. We'll see if they can go salvage a win before going to A&M this weekend, which, A&M had one day where they really did well against Tennessee. Going out there, it looks ominous. Last weekend, the more you dig into Mississippi State and the issues they have, and the more you dig into how Carolina played, especially on Sunday after making the rounds yesterday and hearing Whittle and Jamie talk, and just kind of reading up on some stuff, it's worse than maybe I think I initially thought. So that was, and Carolina's got to put some runs on the board tonight because they've given up 11 unanswered. They gave up 5 and then, of course, got shut out on Sunday. So we'll see what happens. They lose to Upstate. The wheels, at least one of the wheels will start to come off. Maybe not all 4, but it's not looking good for the baseball program at this point. And it's not just this team. I have a lot of concern about that program just from a new era of college athletics standpoint with revenue share coming and all that good stuff. I know they're getting full scholarships, but, they've got to recruit. It's been a long time since South Carolina's been to Omaha. We're going on, 13 years now since that last trip out where they lost Arizona in 2012. So that's a while. Kids these days probably don't remember, they were babies, and you recruit far in advance. And it's just, there's some challenges there. You could, it's fundamentally different than football and men's basketball, and especially women's basketball, really other sports too. So, we'll see what happens with that, but I am concerned, and not just hey, I think they'll just recruit their way out of it. Maybe they will, but and I hope. Obviously, it stinks to have a bad men's basketball season, but there's enough going on with like football recruiting. Maybe not so much anymore with them moving the signing day, right? Signing day's in December now, but there's enough going on. You're looking forward to baseball, all that good stuff, to where you can survive. And believe me, we've been through bad men's basketball seasons before around here. When it's really good, it's kind of like a bonus. It's like that cherry on top of the sundae, and the Gamecock Sports Sunday, right? But you can get there. But having a bad baseball team, and this has happened too often. I mean, I'm not hanging this on Paul Maneri's head completely as far as the recent history of the program, but my gosh, you go back to Mark Kingston's team a few years back that lost 22 SEC games. That's unheard of. This team's on track to lose more right now. And the league's tough, but man, in baseball, it's always been tough. It's not like Texas. I mean, Texas and Oklahoma are two very good teams, very good programs. It's another tough out. But it's not like if they had the 14 teams left over from, I mean, it didn't have those two, that this league would be any easier, that there would be, these easy outs. But you also look at some other teams that are struggling, that have ugly, ugly records. And you just can't tell me Carolina's better than they are right now, as much as they've struggled, you know? So I don't know, folks. I don't know. But USC upstate's the alma mater, but I never pull for them when they play the Gamecocks. And so I know they beat Clemson in baseball a couple of years ago, but always certainly wish them the best. Thought it was really cool when they played Wofford for the new Spartanburg Stadium, the minor league park up there, Fifth Third Park, the home of the Hub City Spartanburgers. Looks fantastic. Very proud to be from Spartanburg and proud of all things Berg, but I'm a Gamecock, and especially in baseball, and need them to win tonight. Just don't lose that game. You start losing midweeks on top of everything else, and it gets, as I like to say, even more ominous. So, no hope, or I don't want to say no, very little hope. But hey, in lots of sports, I've seen teams be god awful and turn it around. I mean, it's not out of the question. But like I said, I just don't know that I can look at everybody else and think, well, I mean, A&M, I think we kind of knew they were just lollygagging around, and they woke up in Knoxville and said, well, gosh, these guys beat us for the national championship last year. We owe them one. Let's lock in and go play. That happens. But you don't get that sense with Carolina. And even in the games, so Carolina's won 2 games against quote unquote power 4 or 5 opposition. Baseball, there's powerful teams in other conferences, especially out west. But, so against the teams that aren't considered mid-major or the midweekers or however you want to put it, Carolina's won twice, and Oklahoma once, and then Mississippi State 11-5, 7-3. And in both of those games, both of those teams committed just egregious errors. And as Mad Dog Mullinax pointed out to me yesterday, even in the games against the midweekers that Carolina's won some of them, the other teams just screwed it up. So, I mean, Carolina screwed it up game 3 against Oklahoma, but that Mississippi State went out there, they bobble, 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 bobble. So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm tired of talking about baseball. Let's get this big picture stuff, like with Florida basketball and how it may apply. Last night's game, whenever a team's play for national titles, especially in basketball, I always, like to look and see how could this possibly apply to Carolina. If North Carolina and Kentucky playing in basketball, there's nothing to apply there. Those programs are fundamentally different. So is Kansas. So are some of the schools in the Big East, which, beyond the fact they're going to have a little more money for now, they're basketball schools. That's what all they have. I mean, Villanova and South Carolina are different jobs. North Carolina and South Carolina are different jobs. Duke is different. There's not a whole lot of geography that helps you in hoops. I don't think. I will say the state of Texas, probably a good place to have a basketball program. And I say that because I look the past, 7, 8 years, we've had Texas Tech play for a national title. We've had Baylor win the national title, and then we had Houston go to Final Fours and play for the national title. None of those teams are Texas and Texas A&M. You can go all the way back to the Texas Western, which is now UTEP days back in the day. They made a movie about it. First starting 5 that were African American against Adolph Rupp in Kentucky. It's a movie. It's a good movie. But they won it all back in the day. UTEP has won a national championship in basketball. Now TCU and SMU and Rice aren't that good, but I mean, even back when Brad Underwood was at Stephen F. Austin, so maybe being in Texas, my point is, helps. I think maybe at one point being in Michigan probably helped because they got a lot of basketball talent. But in football, there's nothing to apply when you look at Ohio State and Notre Dame. Nothing. Ohio State, even if they didn't have NIL money, they're always going to be pretty good because Ohio's a great football, blah, 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 blah. Notre Dame has been able to go out and achieve a certain level of talent every year. It may not be championship winning talent, but it's good just because they're Notre Dame. And by the way, Rodney Dunham is probably going to commit there. 5-star defensive end target from Charlotte. He went up there and was blown away. So that happens. But there's nothing to take away there. There's nothing to take away from Georgia or Texas. You got to do it differently just because of geography. And geography still really matters in college football. To some players, it doesn't. Those players sometimes aren't very good, i.e., the exodus of players that have gone to join Lincoln Riley out at Southern Cal. Not that they're not individually talented, but they're not going to help you win, which I don't really care that much about, winning signing day. I care about winning, and most coaches do, and most fans do, and everybody should. But in basketball, you can always take away a little something, especially when it's Florida and Houston. So in basketball, I'll say this. For Lamont Paris, I look at those, kind of dug into how the rosters were constructed and all that good stuff, style of play. Lamont Paris is polar opposite of Todd Golden, style of play-wise. And I dug in, Florida, there's a bunch of articles out about how they used advanced analytics, not just scoring and shooting percentage, but, what's this guy from this side? They use that. And I hope college basketball does not become as analytics driven as the NBA, because I think that product now leaves a lot to be desired. It's almost boring. I mean, it's a great spectacle at times, but it's not competitive basketball. But and so they used analytics. They have some, when they evaluate players, they have to check boxes as far as, are they a fit? They don't deal with the money thing. If a player wants, they don't give in to demands. If it's all about money, they pass. And they won the national championship and went 36-4 in his third year. So that works. But also, there's more than one way to win. And I think as Florida's season kind of becomes history and stuff like that, or recent history, other schools that are wanting a leg up are probably going to copy it, emulate it. Why aren't we doing analytics? Why aren't we doing this? And so I think that's kind of their way. And I don't know that South Carolina, other than maybe doing specific analytics as it relates to what Lamont Paris likes to do. And I don't know that they're not with the players they've targeted in the portal. But, other than that part of it, I think Carolina's probably much more like Houston. As far as how they need to win, you look back through the years and when have they won? Not often, but when they have, they've played good defense. Houston obviously does that. They've had an uptick in talent, obviously, and they've been tough. I mean, this program got to a Final Four, and I think that was I think toughness was a trademark of that run. And so I look at it, and I think it's much more like Houston and kind of that plan. And Kelvin Sampson's been doing it similarly for years. Now, he's never won the big one, but lots of great coaches do not. And as much as I thought he was kind of a prick when he called out the reporter, and I'm not one to defend reporters all the time, right? But about how to pronounce Gonzaga, I thought that was a prick move, But he is a great coach, and so I look at, if I look at the two and any similarities in basketball, I would go with Houston right? As far as how does that apply? How can Carolina win? And Houston does it every year, and they don't really have a bunch of big name guys. It's not Phi Slamma Jamma from back in the 80s when they had Akeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler and those cats. They've had some bad luck in championship games, too, by the way. I don't know. Probably a lot of my audience now is too young to remember, but in '83, NC State went on this miracle run under Jim Valvano, won the national championship, 62-60, and then they played Houston, and that was a great Houston team. I mean, it was a big upset. So anyway, I think if you're looking for something to kind of look and emulate, I think that Lamont Paris, style wise, how he wins, all that good stuff, is much more like Kelvin Sampson. But football, I think, if you want to bring it back to that, there is a football kind of comparison here. Now, I don't think anybody's saying the Gamecocks are going to win the national championship this year. I'd be surprised. Football. Now, I guess we now have a tournament in football, but it's a lot different. It's a lot different. I think the Gamecocks, had they gotten in last year, would have maybe, if they continued to play the way they were playing, would have made some noise with Lenore Sellers and all that, as long as they didn't have to run into Ohio State. Ohio State was really the only team that I looked at and went, probably don't want to play them. Not that they would have beaten Penn State or Texas or Georgia or any of those other teams, but or Notre Dame, who was on a roll too. But I think Carolina matched up with every single one of them. I mean, there was no like, oh God, it's going to be tough to beat these guys. So had they gotten in last year, who knows what would have happened? They didn't. But it's different. Football is different. There's still certain things, that you run into in a tournament. And I'm not saying Carolina's going to get on a heater and win it all. But as far as roster construction, and look, championships don't come down, or they're not just about roster construction. Ohio State, for example, the football last year, they had to get it together to go win. Their roster certainly helped them. But, if Will Howard doesn't start, completing a bunch of passes and their defense doesn't play out their mind, if Jack Sawyer doesn't pick up that fumble, against Texas, and Texas may score there, they may be out. I mean, it's not Adwater. We lived through the Alabama dynasty and everybody thinks, well, it's just about recruiting number one classes. No, it's not. Kirby Smart's recruited top 3 for how many years, and he's got a very young team this year. I mean, if you recruit in the top 3 for however many years, and you don't use the portal all that much, they do use the portal. I mean, how are you young all of a sudden? Well, it's because we're back now to the era in college football where there's not a dynasty anymore. And you're going to have teams that sign number one classes and recruit in the top 3 that will have issues from year to year. This is how it always has been in college football. Now it's the same cabal of teams that cycle through. But, we're back to the time where, Texas wins it this year, then Florida, and then, or go back to the time where, Oklahoma won it in 2000. There was Miami, then Ohio State wins, and then you got a mini dynasty in Southern Cal, and then Texas snaps that, and then the SEC stuff starts. So, it's like that. So I'm not saying national championship. It's not an apples to apples comparison, but roster construction. Florida is a poster child in basketball about how there is more than one way to do it these days in college sports. There's all the panic about the money. There's the panic about these teams spending. In Gamecock land, there's open questioning. How, oh my gosh, why aren't they spending this all this stuff, latching on to rumors, especially. And a lot of people can't see through the chaos, but the teams that do see through the chaos are the ones that are going to be successful. And so here's my point. Shane Beamer and the football staff, as far as roster construction goes, they have a lot of similarities as far as what they look for, both in the portal, which is hard, and also on the high school end of things, which is not easy, especially when you want good players. It's still very competitive, as we know from talking about Rodney Dunham just now. they're very specific about how and who and what, and it's a lot of it has to do with fitting the culture. And I think what Beamer and company have done is they've kind of hedged their bets. They're like, listen, you know, let's not do anything to disrupt the culture here. Protect it at all costs. And I was told that about Shane Beamer in 2021 when he first got here. And you may say, well, you can talk all the culture you want, but winning is what matters, and it does, absolutely. And I think he's won enough. I think 2023 was unfortunate. I think the fact that they got off the mat and won three straight against teams they should have beaten. Maybe not Kentucky, but they should have beaten Vandy and Jacksonville State. Um, and they had the unfortunate Clemson game and didn't get to a bowl. They could have mailed it in, and they didn't. I think last year, after starting 1-3 in the SEC, they could have mailed it in, and they didn't. Teams that don't have that culture do, especially now. And I'm not even going to use Florida State as an example. There's other examples if you look closely at teams that lose games that they have no business losing games in key moments, and teams whose seasons just fall apart on them because they're done. Or teams that go out like the Nebraska Cornhuskers last year. They go from almost beating Ohio State to getting waxed by Indiana 56-7. I mean, things like that. It's just kind of eye opening. I mentioned Southern Cal earlier. I mean, that's in it. No excuse. No excuse. I mean, Notre Dame is an example of a good culture. They decided, hey, we're not going to take this any after losing to Northern Illinois. They said, we're not taking this anymore. The leaders on the team stepped up, et cetera. And if you don't have the baseline guys in your program that fit, and that's hard to determine a lot, it's not going to be universal. But if you don't have the baseline guys in your program, that's not going to work. And when they're interviewing the Florida assistant coach for basketball that did the analytics and the recruiting, he said, we didn't outbid anybody on this roster. We don't talk about, if it's money, we just wish them well. And Beamer's done the same thing if it's all about money. And if you're discerning like that, what that does, and if you notice Florida basketball, when adversity struck, when they were down, they refused to lose. That's a tough basketball team. You can talk about analytics and the finesse style of play and all that, but they played one of the toughest basketball teams I've seen in a long time in the tournament in Houston, maybe since that Carolina team. And they matched their toughness and came back. And that's mentally, physically, and all of the above. And so switching it back to Carolina football, I think those are the kind of folks you need, because guess what's happening everywhere else at certain programs? They're either one of two things from what I can tell. One, they're still married to the old school recruiting approach and feel it's almost like they feel entitled to all the top recruits. Well, we're this team, so we're going to get all these top recruits and sign all these 5 stars. And then they get there and you look at their outbound portal numbers and they're huge and they're a bunch of highly rated guys. Some of those guys aren't worth a flip because they're entitled and they're probably never going to be successful. Some of those guys, though, are pretty good, and they're going elsewhere to be good, but they're entitled, so they leave, and they finally ultimately get it together. And we have so much of that in recruiting from the high school ranks because of the good job back in the mid-2000s that yours truly and everybody else at Rivals.com did. We mainstreamed it. All of a sudden, ESPN got involved. Everything's on TV. And I'm not mad at the kids. It's human nature, man. Shoot. I mean, I have a 16-year-old stepson. Trust me. That dude was on TV and had 80,000 followers on social media and was semi-famous, and all these fan bases were kissing his butt publicly, and then all these coaches that are on TV all the time were kissing his butt. I mean, that dude, I'd have to make him go do like yard work or something or manual labor to just humble him. I mean, it could get out of control. I'd have been the same way. I'll be honest. And so those teams are still like old school. We're entitled to all the great recruits, blah, blah, blah. Other teams, and they blend or straight portal, like Ole Miss. That's fine too. That's working for them. Um, it's rare when you look across college football and you say, well, who's found the sweet spot? Well, none of them have. They all have different challenges, including South Carolina. I mean, for a long time, think about it. If South Carolina had the NIL budget that they have now, 2 or 3 years ago, I don't know that some of the players that they lost in the portal would have stayed. I don't know, or would have left. I don't know if they couldn't have gotten a few more good players. Maybe that's not a 5-7 in 2023. But you kind of look across the landscape, and everybody's kind of in a different direction. It's no longer about I call it the Tommy Tuberville desire. Tommy Tuberville's mad because Indiana bought, he said they bought a team because they got all those transfers and went to the playoff. Well, it's because he's insulted that Indiana is winning. Now, I don't think Indiana should have been in the playoff. That's another debate. But he's insulted because, all the almighty Auburn Tigers, who have lost how many losing seasons in a row now, they should have had players. And all these players are leaving. That's the problem. Well, tough. For the Blue Bloods, tough. For any team that's tough. Like I said, it's hard. In college football, it's still the same cabal. Tough, But I think when you look at Florida in basketball, which is way more transient, way more year to year than football, although football is more transient than it was, Todd Golden and his staff having a plan and being married to it and not ever divorcing it, that pays off these days in this new crazy era of college sports that we're in. And my friends in Gamecock land, you can be happy that your head football coach is also married to his way of doing things. And I can't promise they're going to win 10, 11, 8, 7. Kind of sounded like Stone Cold. Don't care if you got 1 billion. What? 2 billion. What? Can't promise any of that. I don't know. SEC football's tough. Almost sick of talking about how tough the SEC is. But I do know this. If Carolina is even good, like 8-4 good next year, that's different than how it used to be around here when that much talent walked out the door and you had to replace it. Especially in like year five under the old rules, you're kind of peaking. A lot of coaches got fired in year 5. Well, Muschamp got fired during year 5. Brad Scott and Sparky Woods at the end of year 5. Lou Holtz in year 5 lost 63-17 to Clemson. I mean, year 5 hadn't always been peaches and cream, right? And it's usually because you're cycling through a new coaching staff. You have attrition. Your first couple of recruiting classes are kind of or as the kids say, mid. There's no transfer portal. You may plug holes with JUCOs. It's one of those things. And then you end up getting fired because it's year 5 and people have expectations. And then you start, start the cycle all over again. But so I know Beamer has a little bit more of an advantage because he has the portal. But this program hadn't just replaced players like that, not missed a beat. And that, my final point, my Gamecock friends, that is the key to unlocking the door to having a better program team job. The team, they had a good team last year. You want to elevate the program, sustain it. And in football, Carolina's been pretty good about, not letting the bottom drop out too often. Since 2000, they've been pretty consistent, like 6-9 win team on average. I think they average about 7. So that's better than it used to be. And you're also playing a tougher schedule in the SEC, but you want to raise that level, get it going with next year. All right, that's it for coffee. JC Shurburtt. Don't forget Inside the Gamecocks, the show in the morning show coming up later. Holla at you soon.